is our census. This is a database of all the space-related organizations in the state, college programs, civic institutions like observatories, private companies, finance firms that invest in space. Currently has more than 1,000 entries. We are a founding member of NYCST. We are an active member of the NASA New York Space Grant Consortium here at Cornell. They're phenomenal partners. Thank you for having us. We hold key networking events like Space Week New York. We'll preview a little bit more about that later. And our goal is to support stakeholders like yourselves, deepen networking across the state, deepen that cohesion, and then engage local, state, agencies, officials that aren't currently engaged to grow the space ecosystem. So this is just a map of our census. Link is right there, empirespace.org/data. This is just kind of how we group things. If you go to our website, all of this is interactive thanks to an internship opportunity that we had via NYCST this summer. All that information has been updated. Links are all valid, so we have good data, so to speak. So this is a graphic. If you've seen any of our presentations before, we love to use this graphic, kind of the high points and areas to focus on in New York. As Lou kind of touched on, we have a lot of tools here. We don't have a lot of resources in New York. Money in terms of NASA economies flows through firms. We are the 15th largest in terms of jobs, economic activity created by direct and indirect work with NASA, environment and network and resources. A lot of companies are siloed. We are a space finance powerhouse, externally focused outside of the state. We have an active civic network to break up that clustering and that fragmentation. Academic and research infrastructure. For example, we're standing at Cornell University, but it's one of many powerhouse colleges and universities in the state. All right. So we do have significant digits for you from our census. Space grant, we track 289 unique companies working in space, aerospace. Problem is, across the state, there are barriers operating at 333 unique sites. Finance barriers. A ballpark of that employment exists in firms or flows through firms in New York City. Is kind of how you cut it, and we are aware that our database companies. There are gaps in environment and network and resources. A lot of largest specializations, aerospace manufacturing and support. That's largely legacy aerospace firms on Long Island. So we work to break up that clustering and that fragmentation. There is a decent network. So some significant digits for you from our census. In the state. We track 289 unique companies working in space, aerospace, processing across the state, satellite information, satellite manufacturing, and unique sites. And then the regional breakdown, there are clusters throughout the state. 65,000, it depends kind of how you cut it, and where that our database is. So every region does have a stake in this ecosystem, and each largest specializations, aerospace manufacturing and support, that's largely legacy aerospace firms on Long Island, attributes that they offer. Lots of telecommunications. There is a decent network of Space Force and defense-related firms in the state. A lot of companies that work in fields related to space data and processing, satellite information, and then satellite manufacturing and support. And then the regional breakdown, there are clusters throughout the state. Thank you. Buffalo, so to get into some of the digits that we hope to have in the future, this was a project that we so every region does have a stake in this ecosystem, and each offers a unique, consider a private sector checkup. We developed different, fairly extensive questionnaire, that they offer. Questions. So to get into some of the different digits that we hope to have in the future, this was a project that we completed challenges with recruiting talent and workforce development. Our needs assessment. We considered a focus group, check out 45 organizations, largely affiliates of one of the fairly extensive questionnaire, 80+ questions. Some of the groups that we had a range of different topics with government relations, and we are going to share some of the highlights with recruiting talent and workforce development together. So participating organizations, 45 organizations, largely affiliates of one of the two Cornell-based consortia. Some of the groups that we had extensive partnerships with. Who are you? How do you identify yourself? And we are going to share some of the highlights of the data that we are hoping in their. So participating organizations, we ask companies to classify themselves. Financial status, big question that we really want to get some specific data on. Where are you? How do you identify yourselves? What type of funding are they trying to access? Where they are in their, what type of funding are people finding? Ease in accessing, that we can spread those that we really want to get other companies data on. Where are companies struggling? Specifically, government type of funding are using state level financing programs? Are they using federal level financing programs? What type of funding are people finding? Don't lean too much in accessing into the specific numbers here. This is not companies all 290, but this is a snapshot of specifically government financing that we hope to gather. Level financing programs. Are they using federal level financing programs? don't lean too much into the specific numbers here. This is not all. Connectivity is another area that we really focus on that we hope to gather. Survey. Connectivity is another area that we really focus on in this survey. Do they have robust partnerships with academic institutions? Other dimensions. Do they have robust partnerships? Do they have robust partnerships with academic institutions? Early results indicate that a lot of companies, non-governmental institutions, have robust early results indicate that a lot of them are also, if you look over at the graphic at the right, have satisfied robust with the level of connections that they have, and they are also, if you look over at the graphic, so that is something that we satisfied with the level of connections that they have in New York. What kind of connections are companies? So that is something that we what are they struggling with? What kind of or down deeper into what kind of relationships are they looking to build that they haven't been able to build? What kind can help them build? Relationships are they looking to build that they haven't been able to build that we can help them build? R&D satisfaction, so in terms of access to facilities and resources for testing, development, things of that nature. Obviously, New York does not have launch capabilities at the current moment. That is unlikely to change in the foreseeable future, despite how much all of us might wish that to not be the case. So how difficult is it for these companies to access those capabilities out of the state? Is it prohibitive? Is it simply challenging? Are there ways that we can find to ease some of those challenges? And then testing facilities. It's not surprising to us, or probably anyone else in this room, that a lot of companies, even in this early batch, reported a lack of access to facilities that they need to conduct the work that they want to conduct, which is why we are so excited about some of the work that NYCST is doing with the facilities that they're bringing online. I've been lucky enough to have a tour twice. If you haven't yet, please look into that. Even though it's not yet complete, the vision for what they want to do with that space, the new capabilities that they want to bring online and offer to the entire ecosystem to help companies grow, to help meet some of these challenges, is really important. So phase 2 will be to take this survey statewide, to try to get as many of the 289 companies that we've identified to answer, because then we have a reliable data set of how the private sector component of the ecosystem is feeling. What are they struggling with? What parts of the finance cycle do they have challenges with? What relationships are they looking to build in their communities? Are there geographic differences? Are some regions struggling with X, other regions are struggling with Y? The data will help us inform all of those secondary, incredibly important, but not inherently obvious questions. And then that then informs policy. If you know where the specific gaps are, if you know where the specific challenges are, and you have hard data informed by the companies themselves, it makes it much easier to go to local, regional, state economic development organizations and say, we need to prioritize X, Y, and Z. If you don't believe me, we did a survey. The companies are telling you the exact same thing. So we are hoping to start that later this year. Target is to have it complete and published within the first half of 2025. A lot of that is dependent on response rate, which we do not control. So hopefully folks are interested and willing to participate. And that is the future significant digits that we hope to offer, that we think will really inform a lot of policymaking and networking and other kinds of growth in the years ahead. So longer term, just to kind of zoom it out a little bit more and kind of wrap up from where I started. So we're looking to rank and categorize those barriers and those needs. Where are companies struggling the most? What's the lowest hanging fruit that can be tackled and dealt with easily? What are more specialized, intense problems that may take more time to resolve? So that's kind of one of the key objectives. Moving forward, and it does seem to dovetail with some of the stuff that may be coming later, is that policy advocacy and legislative engagement. When we look at peer states, other states that have successful space ecosystems, Texas, Florida, Virginia, Colorado, they have much more cohesive networks. Academia is plugged in with the private sector. They meet and innovate in spaces organized and put together by civic society, nonprofit groups, and there is an active and involved and informed state and local legislative and policymaking apparatus. The people who pass laws and fund these programs in these states are aware of what's going on. They're invested in what's going on. And then they are able to make substantive changes to help these ecosystems grow. So that is something that we hope to kickstart more in the future. For those who are listening, if you run a space company in New York, if you don't have relationships with your local legislators, start building them. We are able to provide insight and guidance in that dimension if you would like to. If you already have existing relationships with your legislators, leverage them. Meet with them on a regular basis. As someone who comes from the policy and government sphere, those connections are really only useful if they're sustained. You can't have one meeting, get your point across, and everything flows from there. You need to be engaging with folks, quarterly, providing them updates. Here's the latest with us. Do you have updates for us? Are there tools that we should be using that we're not aware of? Are there events that we should be participating in that we're not aware of? That's a critically important relationship that we're hoping to kind of build out in the future. And then events and outreach. Space Week is an event that we've held the last couple of years, kind of a mix of celebration of New York's history in space, all that we have accomplished and is currently going on, while strategizing for the future, trying to hold events that bring people together that haven't met, address challenges that need addressing. So that'll be next year, April 14th through 18th. We are already planning events and looking for sponsors and engaged parties. We're hoping to have a mix of virtual and in-person throughout the state that entire week. So if you are interested in that, please reach out. So thank you very much for allowing me to rant about some significant digits. Here's some information about how to reach out to us. And yeah, with that, I will turn it back over to Lou.
Thank you, Patrick. And those are very significant digits that you gave us. 289 companies, probably 290. I don't know if SSPI is in that mix. We're in a different part, okay. But we develop ecosystems for states and organizations. If anyone is interested in us, it's sspi.org, and we are proud to be based and headquartered in New York because we are all New Yorkers here. That point about developing the ecosystems and the collaboration is so fundamental because what takes place when you have the private sector, the academic sector, and the local government sector collaborating is the Dutch invented this concept. They call it the triple helix. You actually create a new DNA economically and socially for your businesses. And so that's probably the work to be done in New York that I think is lacking as much as anything else. Patrick, would you say that's probably the big gap right now, that you don't see that evolve? Yeah.
In terms of how far we lag behind peer states, that would probably be the category in which we lag the furthest.
Yeah, that would be my assessment as well. Again, thank you for that, and stick around because I know Joe wants you up here shortly as well. I neglected in my introductory remarks to shout out the people who actually pay our bills here at the round table. So I'm going to circle back and do that. Daruva Space, Satshore, and the Luxembourg Trade and Investment Office have been extremely loyal supporters of this roundtable since day one, and we really appreciate their support. And from time to time, you will see some of their representatives appear on the roundtable. But whenever you can do business with them, or if you want to do business with them, let us know, and we will put you in touch with Daruva, Satshore, and the Luxembourg Trade and Investment Office in New York. There they are. Now, typically what happens with Joseph Fargnoli, my colleague here, is that he comes on at the end. He does the New York Minute, if any of you have seen the program online before, and he does sort of a reaction to everything he's heard today. However, We're going to move up the New York Minute today, and Joe is going to actually come up and do like a New York 4 or 5 hours today. No, he's going to do a couple of minutes, but he has a very special proposition and presentation that he wants to make. And after that, we're going to roll into our panels, which Joe will be moderating. So what we are actually going to do is break down where Patrick started us off, talk now to the very specific points about what the state needs and how it can get done. You know, we'll continue to chip away at the stone until we have our masterpiece in a couple of years, and then move on. And then I'll finish up by bringing in some best practices. We've got the Texas Space Commission, we've got the government of Luxembourg, and we've got an advisor, special advisor to the White House, who is talking about space as a protected infrastructure and what the opportunities are for companies in New York if that policy can continue to move forward. So that's the game plan today. And with that said, I'm going to call up the host of the New York Minute from Rochester, New York, Mr. Joseph Fargnoli, the founder of the New York Space Alliance. Hi, Joe.
All right, thank you, Lou, for that introduction. I also want to acknowledge Tamara for her excellent work in putting this together. And I also want to thank Patrick for that great introduction. Patrick's an example of one of the voices in New York State who is just stepping forward to help fill the void of creating the New York space economy, and his work is really very indispensable to what we're trying to do. We can go to our first chart, Tamara. So the name of this event today is Why Not New York? So I think Patrick did a great job of explaining the status of the space economy in New York State. We have a number of points of light. We've got a great history of what we've done in New York. The rest of the country is not standing still. Other states are investing aggressively in creating their space economy. You know, Patrick can go into a lot more detail on how great our foundation is to create a space economy. It seems like as a state, we lack the will. We lack the unified vision to create the space economy we could have. So our question today is, why not New York? Well, in response to that, we're offering a proposal. This is a proposal from New York Space Alliance. We are not speaking on behalf of Cornell University or anyone else. This is our personal proposal that we'd like to make in collaboration with Patrick's great legislative liaison work that he's doing. But we're introducing this today for the first time. So the question is, how do we make a New York-sized impact in space? And the New York-sized impact in space is important to consider because we have a certain ethos, a certain set of values in the state. I find that using space to support the UN's SDG, Sustainable Development Goals, captures the essence of the way New York State wants to contribute to the betterment and advancement of humanity. We have some historical legacy behind what holds us back in space in terms of some of the state values, but we want to focus on where we're strong. So in this presentation, I just want to go through some ideas, introduce this proposal, and then we're going to have a rock star panel up here talking about various aspects of what it takes to grow a space economy. So you'll hear directly from people in the trenches doing this every day. Am I flipping or are you? Okay, so pardon the grammatical error here, but we believe this empire state must once again take center stage and expand its role as America's leader in space. If we go back to the days of Apollo, the days of the original work that was done, we have been leaders in space in New York State. Okay, so for over 60 years, the Empire State has been at the forefront of space exploration, discovery, and innovation as home to many industry-leading companies and universities. As the space industry opens up to commercial, private investment, New York must once again take center stage and expand its role as America's leader in space. We've seen the forecasts, the $1 trillion space economy forecasts. It's growing, it's becoming real. I don't think it's going to take 20 years to get there. It's coming at us very fast. We want New York to be poised to reap the benefits that come from this growth of the private space economy. So, wonderful. But how will New York step up to lead in innovation? Not just technical innovation, but finance innovation, corporate innovation. What will New York State do? So we're laying out 6 ways New York can lay the groundwork for the space economy. And we're calling this proposal New York 2036. You might find that it looks very similar to Texas's plan, because it is. If Texas can do it, why can't New York do it? We've mimicked the ideas, and we're challenging ourselves to say, why are we ceding the growth of the space economy to Texas? There's no need for that. We very justifiably build very expensive stadiums in Western New York for the greatest football team ever. But if we're willing to make half that investment, we could significantly grow the New York space economy. By the way, go Bills. So this proposal we're putting together, we've titled it A91-927-24. We are suggesting legislation to create 2 entities, the New York Space Commission and the New York Aerospace Research and Space Economy Consortium. The basic idea is we've got all kinds of great research going on in the state that is uncoordinated, does not directly lead as much as possible to the benefit of the New York space economy. And we do not yet have a space identity in New York State. We are devoid of a space identity. The Space Commission will form that identity, will work on the economic integration of technology into local jobs, and the Research and Space Economy Consortium will focus on the kind of down and in detailed work, much of which will happen here at Cornell and other great universities across the state, to fuel the development of this economy, to create the conditions that make it right for companies like URSA to be hatched and grown within the state. We are also calling for creating and funding a Cornell Space Research Facility in Ithaca and across the state, but particularly in Ithaca. The NYCST is a marvelous start, but that's only on NASA dollars. We want state funding to come in and support the development of this across the state. So our first point is this proposal. Second point, this New York Space Commission, what does it do? We envision putting together a 9-member board, and this commission works to strengthen New York's proven leadership in civil, commercial, and military aerospace by promoting innovation in the field of space exploration and commercial aerospace opportunities. It will administer a $150 million state dollars fund, which is going to be appropriated to the Space Exploration and Aerospace Research Fund, which will be dispersed across academic institutions across the state. We're also proposing this Aerospace Research and Space Economy Consortium, again, a 9-member executive committee, including representatives from major universities across the state. They would identify opportunities for research that promote development and commercial space activity in New York. That does not mean inventing new subatomic particles necessarily. It means what applied research do we need to do to grow the space economy in New York State for the benefit of the strengthening of the US space economy. They will identify research that promotes development and commercial space activity in New York State. And that's a very specific kind of research that's not necessarily only applied, but it's aimed at fostering, spinning out companies that will grow the New York space economy and supporting established companies that need to cross this very difficult barrier of academia industry. This consortium will also make recommendations to the Commission about the use of space-related funds, and they are responsible for developing a strategic plan. Think about this, a cogent, coherent strategic plan as to how we're going to conduct research across the state to grow the New York space economy. We're suggesting the creation of what we'll call an exploration park, perhaps here in Ithaca, perhaps growing NYCST by a significant factor. We're suggesting dedicating $350 million, half the state contribution to a football stadium, to the Space Commission, $150 million dedicated to this research fund, and $200 million going to Cornell, SUNY, and other universities across the state for research infrastructure. NYCST is a hint of what we're suggesting gets built across the state in this exploration park. Next, people. We have great human talent in this state, a few points of excellence, a few great universities that do space-specific work. We want to expand that. We want to develop programs at all New York universities to prepare the next generation of skilled workers, positioning New York as the beacon to orient US space companies and commercialization efforts to ensure that those who reach for the stars do so from the Empire State. This will be aerospace engineers. This will be mechanical engineers. This will also be business majors. This will also be marketing people. It will also be social scientists wondering how we can create a space population that will be free of the burdens we've faced on Earth. How will we address the social issues as we move this transition and not make space an escape capsule, but the opportunity, as was when our original forefounders crossed the ocean, to create a new state of mind and a new way of living as humanity. So this will be a very wide-reaching scope of how we change our attitude towards education. We want to see, the last point of this proposal is we want to see New Yorkers continue to develop the commercial space economy. Part of our panel will discuss what is necessary to accelerate New Yorkers' participation in developing this economy. Currently, we're playing key roles in developing many aspects of the commercial space economy. We want to continue to pioneer the application of institutional investment in promoting this new space economy, and we want to be seen as the place to start and grow a space company. Could there be special tax credits for space companies? How can we attract talent, keep it here, and keep our identity as a space economy strong? So lastly, I hope we remember this date, September 18th, 2024 in Ithaca, New York, as a monumental date at which time a number of the factors came together for us to start to capture our identity as a space economy. I love big dates and big events. You know, this date, May 24th, 1844, where the first telegraph was transmitted between Baltimore and Washington. The message transmitted was, "What hath God wrought?" It leads me to ask the question. I was trying to figure out the future form of the term of the word wrought. I couldn't find it, but what shall we create in the future? How are we going to come together to create the new space economy? And lastly, I believe in remembering the people who got us here. Ezra Cornell was the person who actually was the person who built those telegraph lines, started Western Union, founded this great university. And I have to draw attention to Dr. Carl Sagan, who of course was out of here, who started my love for space and really reminds us of the opportunities to advance humanity through space. Let's think of space as a way for New York to contribute to the advancement of the progress of humanity for peace and prosperity. Let's put our shoulders behind this. Let's get behind this proposal. Let's work with Patrick. Let's get this legislation going and create the New York space economy. So last chart, this is our logo for New York Space Alliance. We kind of snuck in there this term, fill the void. We fill the void. We, the people, fill the void. Government does not move first. We, the people, move first. As Patrick said, it's us going to our legislators saying we want to create a space economy because we want to advance humanity, and we believe space plays a part. This is what we do as New Yorkers. So I really want to thank Megan and Cornell University for hosting us today. I think this is a great chance for us to get a number of people together to start this conversation, and I'd like to move on to introduce our panel. We've got a panel of rock stars coming up now, and I'm going to turn it over to them to introduce themselves. But to sort of scope out who we have, the folks could come up. Barry is here from Moog, and Moog is a homegrown, multi-billion-dollar New York space company. Dr. Darius Senke is here, and he's with Innovation Acceleration Capital. Darius represents the role of private capital in there. Online, we have John with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce to sort of give a sense of whether we're on track here with what we're proposing relative to what other states have proposed. And Michael, did Michael make it? And then Patrick to join our panel as well. Patrick is the voice of numbers and reason here to kind of ground us. So if we could, let's see, we've got mics here, guys. I'd like to start with a round of introductions, and maybe Barry, you could go first for us. And what I'd like to do is just to sort of open up this dialogue and really discuss, from the perspective of industry, private capital, and research and legislative affairs. What do you guys think about this proposal, and how do we move New York to the next level? So, Barry, if you want to introduce yourself and your company.
Sure. Are you going to pull up one slide?
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you. Barry Saff here. So my company is Moog. We're in Western New York. Slide coming up shortly. So just a 1 minute about Moog. So back in 1951, built Moog, Art Moog, and Lou Geyer started the Moog Valve Company, which is now evolved to a $3.3 billion company. So we're 14,000 folks worldwide, but 4,000 of them are in Western New York. Our world headquarters is in Elma, New York, right outside of Buffalo. And we've been, doing aerospace type precision controls since 1951. So we're really broken up into three main operating segments. So we have our military and commercial aircraft. We're on all major platforms, 787, A350 to F-35 and B-22. Wide range of industrial products, everything from precision controls in the medical field. We We do aircraft simulation. We do amusement park rides. Leveraging all that precision control, and then in defense and space, on most of the major ground vehicles, on submarines, tactical missiles in space. Just about every satellite that goes up has some mobile hardware on it. We're on most of the launch vehicles, and we've been around since Space Shuttle, Apollo,
Barry?
all of those.
Barry, a little closer, a little louder.
Sorry about that. So really just kind of a 1 minute high level. We've been in Western New York since 1951. We've stayed there. We found a great place to work, to develop the talent that we need, and doing that, working with the great universities in the area, but also doing a lot with a lot of the regional companies, and those are in many times even competitors and suppliers and all that, working together to make sure that we can develop the strategic workforce development in the region. Thank you.
Darius?
Is that good? There we go. So Innovation Acceleration Capital is a firm that I launched during the pandemic. And I'll just give a brief history of my background and the relevance. So I was born and raised in Los Angeles. I'm a child of a father who worked on the Apollo space missions in LA. So one of my goals in life was to work at Hughes Aircraft Company. I did work at Hughes right out of high school in Hughes Communications, which became DirecTV. So one of my first jobs was to build a program that controlled how much HBO time was on transponder usage on Hughes Communication satellites. So my first job was in space. I then worked at Hughes Research Labs, and they told me about the University of Rochester. So I went to MIT as an undergrad, and then I came to University of Rochester to get my PhD in optical engineering, where I specialized in semiconductor optics, and I did research here at Cornell. So I'm happy to be back. I haven't been back here in 30 years. I graduated, went to Bell Labs, and then I went to the RAND Corporation, and I actually there worked on a project to figure out, should the military have its own satellite network versus using commercial satellite network? And at the time, Motorola created Iridium. This resulted in a purchase of the Iridium satellite network by the military, so you could have global access to satellite communications. I then went to McKinsey and became a VC in the late 90s and funded a number of companies out of Caltech, out of NASA, out of the university system there. So I have some experience in understanding the role that space infrastructure and communications has on developing new innovations. And JPL was right down the street from us. And Ideal Lab, which was an incubator that formed in the late 90s, was a product of NASA JPL system. So that's proof that it can be done. In 2010, I joined Intellectual Ventures, and I became head of strategy for an IP investment fund, where we managed over 70,000 assets, and we use IP as a currency to build an economy. I then went to China in 2018, and then came back. And what I saw in China was a government that moved a country from riding bicycles mostly in the 90s to where they are today, leading 5G and innovation. So my firm, Innovation Acceleration Capital, is about funding research and innovation. I am now a professor at the University of Rochester, a visiting faculty member, where we are thinking about in helping students to understand better the role that R&D plays in developing economies. And we're raising capital, several hundreds of millions of dollars, to buy intellectual property assets and trade them as an asset in 5G, Wi-Fi, communication networks. And I'm on the board of Illuminate, where we actually have a number of space startups that we're funding. And I think my role here is to really talk about how do we move from research to a full economy in a new way, not the traditional do a startup, hope that it succeeds, hope that you build manufacturing. This requires a totally different model that I hope we can discuss here about how to move from science all the way to a commercialized economy. And that's what we're focused on at IAC.
Perfect. Thank you, Darius. I want to go over to John. John, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Joe, and good afternoon, everyone. Very sorry I can't be with you in person today, but really appreciate this opportunity. I am the Executive Director of Space Policy at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce here in Washington, D.C. So, just like I'm sure the Ithaca Chamber or, a local Chamber of Commerce in New York State, we represent, companies across the entire economy of the United States, primarily focused on Congress and the federal government, advocating for a better business environment for all our member companies to operate, grow, generate revenue, and create jobs. And so I started with the Chamber about 2 years ago, established what we call our Space Industry Council. And that's comprised of, I would say, about 70 member companies, ranging from your big prime contractors like a Boeing or a Lockheed Martin, all the way down to some of the startups that, Darius funds and, startups located in New York State and around the country. It's a great representation of the entire space industry. We have launch companies, we have satellite communication companies, Earth observation, and those types of companies, all the way to companies who leverage data and other activities derived from space. And then looking out, companies that are seeking to build commercial space stations to replace the International Space Station. So it's been a lot of fun working with these companies, talking to members of Congress about the space and the space economy, as well as the federal government. It's all, the easiest thing in the world to get a meeting and get someone, to give you 5 minutes of their time to hear about the space industry. But I think, as we'll hear today, how do you get them to act, to the call to action, right? To activate members, to, put money into programs, put money into the industry. Because as Darius, I think, alluded to, a lot of money, companies can generate, at a research dollars and small dollars, but then how do they scale their business? And I think, that's where we are, just looking nationally at the sort of space economy in the industry. A lot of really seeds that have been planted are starting to germinate, but how, again, do we help these companies scale and really reap the benefits of, products and services derived from space? And I think, as Joe spoke, certain states are seeing the potential. It's a new economic sector, new jobs, new businesses, new revenue for those states, and they are moving forward. And certainly excited as a Buffalo, New York native and person who, is very deep ties to New York. How can a state like New York sort of get into this game as well? So look forward to speaking with everyone about that today.
Thank you. So I want to do a quick round of questions, and then we'll go into an open discussion. Barry, I'd like to start with you. Company was founded in the early 50s, Elma, New York, nice little community south of Buffalo. Frankly, why did your company stay in New York, and what is it going to take to help your company grow 10x in New York?
Okay, yeah, thanks. So, we started there when Bill was working at Cornell Aeronautical Lab, another Cornell tie, and, developed, continued to develop products there. But over the years, as we've continued to grow and evolve, we've had really good support from both, local and state governments to help us in our growth objectives. We have, I know Patrick was mentioning kind of relationships with the legislators, and I think we have good relations there. I think they work with us closely to understand our needs as we continue to try to move into new areas. And certainly, as we build new infrastructure and things like that, that's only part of it. Like I said, the talent pool is a big part, and so far we've been fortunate to be able to have the good universities near us to really help us with some of that and to help ensure that we have a talent pipeline. The growing 10x is tough. We're kind of thinking about how do we grow 2x and 3x. So I may have to wait to answer that one until I hear a little bit more.
All right, thank you, Barry. Hey, John, over to you. You heard our proposal for the creation of this New York Space Commission. What are your thoughts? Are we way out of line? Is this a proposal that makes sense? How can you kind of calibrate us here as to what we're trying to put forward to our state?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at certain states like Texas, Florida, Alabama, they are investing heavily, in the potential of this industry. So I think it's ambitious, but you have to be to build and to build a business in the space industry. I think everyone understands that space requires a lot of capital investment up front and a patient sort of investor or funder community supporting that, because the returns are going to take some time. So it's natural to have state and federal government supporting an industry like space. Certainly Texas has recognized that, $350 million, as you said, some going to really building the infrastructure around the Johnson Space Center up for, not government use, commercial industry use, and money going into research. So I think modeling after Texas's plan is very smart. Space Florida, which is sort of the authority, the state level authority in Florida, obviously they have the Kennedy Space Center and all the infrastructure around that site there, which, is a natural anchor for them. But they are building industrial parks throughout the state to support the aerospace industry. Very visionary folks down there that spend a lot of time, obviously, coordinating with the government in Florida, but also the federal government up here in Washington. Alabama as well. I've done a lot around Huntsville. And I'll throw out one state that, probably we all overlook, but just as an example of how, states around the country are recognizing the potential here, Maine. Next month, Maine is going to have a conference around space, and they have potential for some launch, activities there, but they're also investing, in trying to attract space companies to the state there. And I think, as Patrick was saying, that sort of coordination and cohesion between the industry, the community at the community level with your state government leadership and the federal government leadership. Maine has 2 senators, Republican and independent, who are aligned and see the potential here for space and are going to support the state with funding at the federal level. Most likely, at least work to try and direct some funding back to the state to build up, a home to attract industry there. And I think, again, as Patrick spoke, creating that cohesion, statewide is really necessary, and leveraging your lawmakers, both in the House and the Senate, to start thinking about how you can bring some funding home through that commission back to the state to attract more companies and build a real ecosystem around space in the state of New York.
Great, thank you, John. Patrick, over to you. We've discussed a little bit of the initial efforts your group is making to advance legislation to advance the New York space economy. How do you feel like what we're proposing aligns, and what can you sort of lay out as a process that all of us can get our shoulders behind?
So I think to kind of echo what's been said before, this proposal aligns a lot with what we see in other states. We're actually in the final stages of a peer state policy analysis. We looked at Texas, Florida, Colorado, and Virginia. What do those state governments do to support their space ecosystem? Things like a commission, investment funds, tax policies. All of these states have some variation of that, which New York has historically lacked. One of the facts that we like to say is New York is the 15th largest NASA economy, because every year NASA puts out a report about the jobs and economic impact of their work in all the states. So it's easy to compare trends over time and state to state, because it's a uniform metric, which is sometimes difficult to find in space. The states at the top of that list will probably be there in perpetuity. Texas, California, and Florida are hubs of the American space ecosystem. That will never change because of the launch capabilities. And then Virginia and Colorado are states that have positioned themselves very well. Decades ago, they did those kind of baseline things, a commission to study the space sector, creating a statewide commission, and now, 20 or 30 years later, they've reaped the benefits of that. There are new investments, there are new facilities, new companies are locating there. You look at other states. Maine was an example that we're familiar with, a state that has no history or legacy in space. being incredibly proactive with bringing their community together, engaging the state government. So when it comes to New York, we're 15th right now, but there's no guarantee that that stays into the future. In 5 years, we could be 10th or we could be 20th. And New York is in a position where we have to want it. There is no innate inertia to the space economy here. There's no major launch facility or anything like that that will kind of inherently drive growth irregardless of whatever state policy is. If we want to be 10th, we have to want it. We have to work for it. We have to create connections where they haven't existed before. We have to engage the legislature. And one of the things that we found in the areas that New York lags behind our peers the most is that kind of cohesion and engagement from state government. We have universities that are on par with universities in other states. We have legacy industry. We have firms that specialize, across the state, all sorts of different components, optics, electronics, the work that Moog does. So we have all of those components. It's not put together properly. It's very fragmented, it's very regional, and a lot of those entities are focused on partners out of the state. So we have to do, the work. And I think it may sound cheesy, but we need to tell a story. New York does not have a story of its own legacy or vision in space. What we've accomplished, we built the lunar landers. The Apollo lunar landers were built on Long Island, which the vast majority of New Yorkers don't know. Why? Because we don't teach it. We don't tell that story. And so if we don't have, a captivating story about where New York has been in space, where we are right now, and where we want to go in the future, it's impossible for a state that has, we all know upstate versus downstate, city versus Long Island. There are inherent, regionalization tensions in the state that we have to actively, overcome. And so that government engagement component, engaging local economic development and organizations, engaging the state legislature, is the area that New York lags the furthest behind our peers in our experience.
Excellent, thank you. Darius, if you want to wrap us up here, by the top of the hour, Tamara's going to give me the cane. You're down and in the trenches and looking at the creation of companies. You see the good, bad, and the ugly. Based on everything we've talked about, what do you see as needed to help bring more private capital to the process of creating and growing these companies?
That's a good question. I think first of all, we have to think of everything as a system. And I think just listening to everyone, your definition of space is too limited. There's a space in between Earth all the way to the moon. And I think the intermediate space that drones operate in, that low Earth orbiting satellites are going to operate in, that quantum computing networks are going to operate in, that managing the junk that's in space and bringing it down safely to Earth are going to operate in. You don't need to have a launch economy for that. What you need is a ground-based economy that supports that. So if you can build the ground-based systems that are going to create a communication network we're looking at a company that can do free space optics laser point-to-point communication from Earth all the way to a satellite and manage that network. If you can build a drone network that is an interface in between those satellites and Earth to move communication around, and think about drones as part of the space economy, all the way to sending drones up there to repair things, you have to think of the ecosystem and the supply chain to support that economy. You will be the infrastructure that controls it. If you build the solar cell, advanced solar cell battery systems that go into satellites to support these low Earth orbiting satellite networks so that they can have a cheaper solar cell that's not based on gallium arsenide, but based on silicon or perovskites, and build that solar cell solution here, that is what you have to look for. You have to look for these absolutely necessary systems that are required, even if you're shipping them to go be launched in Florida or California. That's an important part of the economy. So I think you have to ask these questions. I know of a company called Empower that created a new way to put a solar cell on a satellite. They have the biggest contract to do this. They can build a plant here. They can build it. They can take the solar cell technology that's coming out of Georgia Tech, build it here, and we could ship the largest number of solar cell based networks. We have a drone company that we funded out of Luminate that wants to build these drones to go up and just observe what's going on in space and report on accidents so that you can have an insurance claim. There's all kinds of things that we can do here to support this economy. We just have to think more out of the box of how we define space in the infrastructure to support the future.
Great, guys, thank you. I would like to open it up to questions now, either in the room or online. I see Kevin.
Hey, Mike, let's get a microphone up.
Kevin doesn't need a mic.
Right after Kevin, I've got a question from the Zoom.
Okay.
Hi, Kevin Kearney with Star Space in Rochester. We build optical payloads, EOIR payloads, and we're a business unit of Optimex, precision optics manufacturer. My question is related to this New York State funding initiative, say the legislation. First of all, have you looked at leveraging NISTAR funding? Because that is state money to fund innovation. Having said that, having worked in many of those programs, they have the Centers for Excellence, the CAT centers. What I will say is not all the innovation is going to come from universities. In fact, I don't know if there's $300 million worth of innovation, present company excluded at Cornell, available within New York State universities. Looking back, one of the most successful programs I've seen is called the Center for Optics Manufacturing, which was federally funded in Rochester. It created real economic value. It created entire companies. So I think as an industry, we need to look at how to fund our own innovation and leverage universities. But my main question is NISTAR a candidate for this type of funding?
Patrick, what are your thoughts on NISTAR?
I'm not going to speak on their behalf. One of the things that we found is that New York has a lot of great programs that could be used to grow the space and aerospace industry. Oftentimes, and this is one of the things that our needs assessment is trying to find out, companies might not be aware of them, and they exist kind of scattershot throughout the state economic development portfolio. You look at a state, even a state like North Carolina or Michigan, you go to their economic development arm, there is an aerospace section that talks to the industry about the programs that exist in the state to offer them. That doesn't really exist in New York, so there are a lot of fantastic programs. We think that they probably need to be leveraged better by existing firms, and then when you have that kind of full spectrum of what's being offered, you can identify gaps for tax credits or new facilities or new hubs that need to be brought online.
Great, thank you. We'll talk more about that at break, Kevin, but I want to go over to Lou for a question.
Sure. I actually have a question for Darius and one for John. Darius, going from government to commercial is like jumping species, right? It's not an easy thing to do. Is there, when you teach, when you research this topic, when you look at how this can be done, how that technology can be transferred, but more importantly, how these local clusters and ecosystems can form as a result of that transfer, have you found over the last, let's say, 15 years, a more rapid conduit for making that happen so that we can get to where Patrick and this roundtable want us to go? And then I have one for John.
All right, so I have a direct answer to that because this is a model we're experimenting with. We want to build manufacturing companies at scale. What's missing in the United States is we've decided to outsource to China, and so we do not do manufacturing innovation. When I was at Bell Labs, we did development. Students left the university and learned how to develop systems. We're building a laser manufacturing company in Rochester from an NSF grant to develop solutions with lasers as a core application of a system for autonomous transportation, for drones, and then communicating with satellites. We need to build manufacturing companies at scale, fund them starting at $50 to $100 million, and then place startups within those ecosystems. If you think of AIM Photonics as an example, but build it for a commercial application, not for prototyping, and build full-scale manufacturing at scale as a business, and then build small companies around that ecosystem and fund it. You have the money to do it. I mean, I know of a manufacturing grant proposal from, if we want to build a manufacturing company, we'll grant it here. So you have this tech hub to build semiconductor foundries. Do it for space foundries. Build a space foundry for making drones, parts of satellites, and the subsystems for it. And that needs to also have research attached to it so that when you leave the university, you do development. We forgot that there's a D part of R&D. The development and manufacturing part of R&D is not happening, and we can build that here in New York.
Yeah, that's similar to Taiwan. I mean, it's what the Taiwanese do,
Yes.
isn't it?
Yeah, basically you can do that. We can outsource in this state. We don't have to go to Asia to outsource.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. And John, for you, launch is not necessary anymore to be in the space business, as both Patrick and Darius said, and as Barry's company always proves. What does the chamber say about developing a services-based economy in some of these regions that we want to spike, that we want to torque in New York State? And is there also a play for post-industrial companies in New York State? Because, boy, we were just full of them. We used to make the Hickok belt in 1951 in Lyons, New York. We don't do it anymore. Is there a model for that?
Yeah, absolutely, Lou. And you could make the argument that launch isn't a good business to be in anyways, right? You don't want to be in launch. It's very expensive. We talked about the $1 trillion economy, right? Maybe by 2040. Well, we're, by various estimates, maybe halfway there, around 500 billion in revenue, maybe worldwide. But if you talk to the people that did that study, whether Morgan Stanley or other, consulting firms, the missing layer in that, how you get to $1 trillion is really software. And I think that's, where the next generation of, space, the economy, the industry is really going to go. On my cell phone, I've got an app. It's a company called Skyfi down in Austin, Texas. I could task a satellite from my phone now. So there's a lot of really interesting software applications that are being developed now that you don't need a lot of physical infrastructure to do. There's a lot of companies in New York, Ursa being one, that's leveraging data derived from satellites and other space platforms to bring a lot of value to you and I and my parents. So I think to think about that. I think also, here in Washington, the Space Force, they're really thinking a lot again about software and the power that they can leverage for their, national security missions. But again, Luke, back to your question about, leveraging the industrial capability and heritage and the physical plant in New York State. I think Darius hit the nail on the head around manufacturing. There's a lot of, components, and Patrick alluded to, Long Island, the heritage with the Apollo program, that New York can harness its industrial base and power to again build products and services that companies launch companies, other satellite manufacturers. There's nothing to say that you can't build a satellite bus in New York like they're doing in Colorado. So I think it's thinking about the tools you have in the state and how you tweak them to appeal to what's needed in the space industry. I'll just throw out one program that people might want to think about. Department of Defense recently stood up the Office of Strategic Capital, and so that's a program where they're going to be they have an investment strategy which I would recommend taking a look at. 37 critical technologies that they will make loans. It's a federal loan program, not taking equity in a company, but an actual loan. And they've got an RFI out now through next month. And at the end of the year and into next year, they will start giving out loans between $10 to $50 million, looking to secure, critical technologies and components for a variety of national security programs, including space. So that's something. Exim Bank right now has got $9 billion of space transactions that it's supporting. I think over $560 million in loans. So there's, between state programs and federal programs, there are certain financial vehicles that companies in New York and elsewhere can tap into to help grow and scale their businesses.
Okay. Can I ask one more, or
Sure.
were there
Yeah,
other
one more
questions?
question, then we're going to go to break.
Other questions out there? Because
There are questions from
We'll take those at break, I think. I think let's do one more and then we'll take break. Yeah.
you got a chat, you want to take the chat questions
No,
after?
we'll take those after. We'll take yours and then we'll go to break.
Okay, I want to throw one out at Barry. Obviously, you listen to the National Chamber of Commerce. Moog is looking to, move to the next level, as we were talking about earlier. Two questions there, Barry. Can you do it from Elma? Because you've been doing it since 1951, but can you continue to do it in 2025 or 2031? And what would you want from your Chamber of Commerce to help you guys move forward the next iteration of your business plan to scale?
And I think we can continue to do it in Elma. I think that we're, so far been successful in supporting the growth that we've had so far. I think that we're, seeing that, the regional approach is, is successful. But I think, as we've heard a couple folks say, probably what would help even more is to have an even wider, wider set of, coalition alliances, things like that across the state. Right now, I think to do, the type of growth that we're looking at, and a lot of that is, somewhat based on, program opportunities, right? But how do we spend our own money to try to develop the new products that are going to be needed for those next even, generational programs? I think we certainly can do it. We can continue building. We work closely with, supplier base regionally, and, even regionally means outside Western New York, right? Even just across the state, but certainly not, broadly across the state. So I think we can, we can continue to do that, but I think we are going to need more help. And I think the biggest help is probably, can we have, tighter connections across the entire state? I think from our perspective, what we're seeing, especially as we see, space becoming that much more critical in all sort of, military strategies and DoD strategies, we think that there's some, significant opportunities, and maybe as a state, we can coalesce around some of the needs that we're going to see and try to, really coalesce more along the state and see, can we, what is the next big equivalent of like the moonshot that maybe this, the state can put forth, especially to potentially meet some of the near-term DoD needs.
Yeah, it's a big meatball sitting out there for you as a question, but would New York Space Alliance Commission help facilitate that?
I think it certainly would. I think that something like that, we're seeing, obviously, with things like the Smart I-Corridor Tech Hub, and, I'm hoping that there are things that we can learn from what's happening from, as we try to reshore semiconductor manufacturing and, creating all those jobs across the state. Feels like there's a lot that we can learn from that to help us from the space perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Barry.
All right, great questions, Lou. Thank you. I think we're going
How did we-
to
okay.
thank John, Barry, Darius, and Patrick for being on our panel. And I would encourage everyone to exchange cards, get to know them. We're going to create this new space economy together and through a bunch of relationships. So, Lou, I think we want to go off to break now.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to go off for about, I think, a half an hour coffee break, Tamara. So we've got a 30-minute coffee break. We encourage you to do exactly what Joe said. Go out there and network and talk about how we can grow our space economy and why the Buffalo Bills are, in some people's minds, the greatest football team of all time. Spoken from a Notre Dame graduate, by the way. Enjoy. We'll see you back here in about 25 minutes.
The old risks remain, and we have added new ones. For that same half-century, we've been littering the road to space with rocket engines, failed satellites, and broken equipment. Earth orbit holds almost 100 million pieces of debris moving at blazing speeds. A piece of junk may be no bigger than a softball, but can hit with the force of a bomb. When things collide in orbit, they make more debris. In just one incident, a failed Russian spacecraft smashed into a commercial satellite. In an instant, thousands more pieces of junk were added to the sky. We also keep launching satellites by the hundreds and thousands. The more we launch, the closer comes the day when Earth orbit could become a minefield that neither people nor machines dare enter. Without meaning to, we could close the road to our future forever.